My name is Charles Steinbach, and I was born with chronic paranoid schizophrenia. I've been this way since I was 8 years old.
And Charles, tell us, what does that mean? People hear the word schizophrenia, and one of the issues surrounding stigma, which is the prejudice that people have, what they think about, the fear, the assumptions about mental illness in general. But the idea of schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia specifically, that term gets thrown around a lot. You hear it in movies. People use it casually. What does it really mean?
What it really means to me is that I visually hallucinate. I hear voices. I have delusional thinking and paranoia. And one of my symptoms, which now I call side effects, is because I understand that schizophrenia is a mindset thing, and it's like having a cold, the virus of a cold, and the symptoms of the cold are coughing, aching. Well, the side effects, those are the side effects as well of having a cold, but same as schizophrenia is that the side effects from what my brain creates are hallucinations and stuff like that. But the stigma that I understand to be in my life and what I've heard from the media and everything is that we're portrayed as very, very, unrealistic people, that we can't think for ourselves or live our own lives or have any goal sets that we have for our life. And for many, many years when I first got diagnosed, I figured out a way to be successful on all those things people say I can't do, or people with schizophrenia say that we can't do.
And you've done a tremendous job, and you've got a great website. I'm on it right now, charlessteinbach.com, CharlesSteinbach.com. There's an incredible movie that you've put together. I've watched the full video. It's free. You can watch it online. You can get the link through the website. It's amazing. And for those folks who have not had the opportunity to watch it yet, let's just go through what it chronicles. It chronicles your life. And one of the things...
Yeah, and, well... The person that's been editing my books for quite a long time, we sat down there. We were going through a book I wrote called How I Deal with You, and that book is an emphasis on in the manner of people are dealing with me, but they don't really in turn consider that I'm trying to deal with you at the same time you're trying to deal with me.
Absolutely.
And we were sitting there, and her name is Pink Blossom. Earth County Productions, that's her company, put it all together. She collected all the money, flew us around. Now I'm doing my part in promoting it through the world.
And it's an outstanding production, and my hat's off to Ms. Blossom and Earth County Productions for putting this together. What I'd like to do in the time that we have together, Charles, is take people through a bit of your journey. So let's go ahead and take it back to when you were a child. You said at the outset, and as part of your introduction, you were born with this condition. What is that like, and when did you first realize that your brain worked differently than a lot of other people's brains?
Well, I didn't really understand what was happening to me until I sat down with somebody. But when I first started, when I was 8, I just started seeing a lot of lights go across my bedroom. And they were different color lights. And I wasn't scared. I didn't run and tell anyone. And I just, I don't know, kind of like the scientist in me started studying it. So I started studying what was happening to me at 8, 9, 10 until I'm 49 right now. So I've been studying it my whole life. But that's how it started, and I don't know, for a lot of years until I first got help, I thought everybody heard voices. I thought everybody saw lights. I thought everybody, had all these things, and I played baseball, I played soccer, I wrestled most of my life, and I did all these things, and all these hallucinations were happening to me, and I just really believed in it, and I really believe in it today, and it's just something that I just connected with. When I was little, I wasn't scared at all. I didn't ask anybody.
When do you first recall, you talked about the lights initially being the first visual hallucination. When do you first recall what are known as auditory hallucinations, that is hearing voices?
Yeah, I was 15 years old, and I have two sets of voices. A man and a woman is a good voice, and a man and a woman are bad voices. And the good voices came out first. I was about 15 years old, and they would tell me things. Like, I would be going to school, and they would say, like, this person's going to do this, and this person's going to act that way, and you're going to be in this situation here, and this is what you do in this situation. And it really happened. Whether my brain created it or not, I was in those situations. Then when I was about 17 years old...
Let me pause you right there, Charles. These voices, you would hear them. They would tell you essentially as you were going, say, to get together with some friends. You would hear these voices, and they would say, you know, this friend is going to do A, B, and C. This friend is going to do X, Y, and Z. You're going to do 1, 2, and 3 before it even happened. And when you got to the situation, those things would actually take place. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I would be in my bedroom listening to music, and they would talk to me and tell me about different parts of life and how life was going to be. And, you know, they showed me visions, too, of my future, as well as the bad voices. They did that, too. And so for 15 till I first got help, I really, truly believed that all this stuff was happening to me was really happening.
Now, let's talk about the bad voices. What kind of things did they say?
Oh, bad voices. Well, they would like use degrading words. They would cut me down. They would tell me, you know, don't believe what the good voices say because they're full of blank, blank, and blank, and you're just not going to be successful. You're an idiot. You know, all the degrading things you could tell a human being. And they would show me hanging in trees. They would tell me I was going to kill myself. They would show me. I'd be walking down the street, and they would show me a vision of me jumping in front of a car.
Now, let's talk about the quality of these voices. And by quality, I mean this. Some people hearing someone who's actually gone through this experience for the first time might think, well, shoot, I don't have paranoid schizophrenia, but I have what a friend of mine calls the golems. I have these voices, these thoughts in my head that, you know, I'm out on the golf course, or I'm playing tennis, or I'm, you know, trying to get through a project, and something in the back of my mind is saying, you know, you're messing up, you're an idiot, that kind of thing. Or I've got the cheerleader, and that's what I'm getting to. So tease out for people, help people understand what you're talking about and how it's different from the little voices those thoughts that most people have in their minds.
Well, most people, like in my voices, they're real voices. I mean, they really sound like human beings, but they were nobody that I ever recognized their voice, or there's nobody I've ever met. Because I got asked this a lot because I've taken lots of tests when I first got help to find out what was happening to me, and they asked me, "Is it anybody's voice you recognize? Did you see them sometime a year ago, or are you interacting with them now?" And it's nobody's voice that I've ever heard before. And that has to do with my bad voices and my good voices. So that was the distinction that I could work with, is that I don't know these people, I've never met these people, and that possibly my brain can be creating these voices.
And it's not your own voice in your head.
No, it's not my own voice.
As people's thoughts are. And these voices are as clear as me and you talking right now. These aren't some kind of background thing.
Yeah, and sometimes the voices are off in a distance. You know, like you're in a room and you hear somebody talking in the background when the volume's escalated in your area, and all of a sudden you distinctively pick out a sound. You know, you could be in a room of crowded people and they'd all be talking, but all of a sudden your senses pick up something across the room that somebody said. And that's kind of like what happens to me sometimes. is that, like, I'll be in my classroom and we'll be having a discussion or something, and I will hear maybe like three sentences talking to me, and I know it's not around there, but I know they're direct. That's the voice.
At some point, did these voices, hearing these voices, you said initially you weren't scared, and you identified with them, you sort of embraced them, if I can use that word.
I lived my life through them wholeheartely.
Did they ever cause you?
Listen. I had a mom and dad. I have a mom and dad, but they didn't make. I didn't live my life like a little kid would. I would live my life through their direction and their belief.
Through the belief and the direction of these voices.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example? Can you give an example of that?
Let's see. Just like I'd say I was about 10 years old, and we were outside playing baseball, like wiffle ball with a bunch of kids. And all these kids were getting upset and angry, and the voices would tell me, well, something bad's going to happen. You need to go home. And so I just stopped what I was doing, and I went home. Come to find out the next day, that 2 or 3 of them got in a fight with each other.
Wow.
So I mean, I totally lived and believed wholeheartedly, as I can be, in my direction as a child, being directed by light signs and these good voices. And even as a child of having I wasn't really a child, I was a teenager when I was hearing voices, but still, the direction of that, I really believed until I was welding one day on aircraft parts, and my bad voices told me to stick my hand on the table and electrocute myself to death. And so I just walked out to the nearest payphone, and this part of the sequence is in the documentary of how I called for help and got evaluated and went down and got stuck in my first crisis house, and then took a lot of tests and sat in a doctor's office, and they said, Charles, you were born with chronic paranoid schizophrenia, and the only question I had for them is, what's that? And they told me all the things that have been happening to me my whole life is that my brain was creating them, and they weren't real.
I want to go back to that wiffle ball game.
Okay.
If someone had been sitting and watching you kids play, would it have looked like this controversy starts, these kids, as kids do, they start talking, discussing, maybe an argument starts out, and you are watching this, and you just, for no apparent reason, no reason that would be apparent to anybody watching, just stop and leave?
Yeah, I just went home.
So to somebody watching this, it would look odd, right? I mean, it would look like this kid just stopped and just left. What the heck's going on?
Yeah, I've kind of been that way my whole life in situations as a child and my early teens, is that they would tell me things about situations, and I would never second guess it. I would never say, well, why? That whys came up when I was older. But I would never second guess it, because I would receive lights for the answers of yes and no and maybe, and, you need to leave and you need to go. And then there was voices. And I, just like I said, wholeheartedly believed in what they were communicating to me. And 9 times out of 10, from my mental standpoint, they were right.
The good voices helped you, like in that wiffle ball game. The bad voices, when those started, actually directed you to harm yourself. How did you decide to ignore the bad voices? You were paying attention to the good ones.
Yeah, I've never, as hard as and as harsh as the bad voices are, and as extreme as they could be, I've never wanted to hurt anybody or myself. I think I was born that way. I've never acted on the harshness of the bad voices and their vocabulary toward me. No matter what the construction of the bad voices, whether it be visually or auditorily, somewhere deep down inside of me, I don't know why, I knew I didn't want to hurt myself or other people.
And I just want to underscore, these are not the kinds of, background thoughts that most everybody has.
No.
This is like somebody yelling in your face, like me talking to you right now. Put your hand in, electrocute yourself or hurt yourself, as vivid and as loud and as full as me and you talking right now. Do I have that right?
Correct. Yeah. And when I first started getting help, the good voices and bad voices would fight with each other, and they would fight extreme. Like you said, they would yell. And I was sitting wherever I was watching TV, and I could hardly ever watch TV when I was younger. I mean, they would yell and scream at each other. They would argue and fight over my life, and I didn't know what was going on, except now I hear voices. That's what I was told, is that my brain was creating all this stuff. You're right. They do get loud.
Wow. And one part in the video in your documentary, Both Worlds, Born with Chronic Paranoid Schizophrenia, you talk about in the video how being in cold weather is better. You like it better. Tell us about that.
Because they have a harder time. The entities, beings, and lost souls and the energy people I see have a harder time manifesting themselves for a couple seconds because they use the energy around everywhere. They feed off of trees. They feed off of whatever natural energies out there to manifest themselves. And in the cold weather, they have a harder time collecting that in energy, the intensity it needs to manifest. So actually, I like being there because I see less.
And it's quieter.
Yeah, in my head. There's one place that I've been so far, and I haven't been everywhere, but it's in Ely, Minnesota. My brain acts differently there than anywhere I've ever been so far.
How did you learn that other people don't hear voices like you do?
Because they told me after my first initial contact, sitting in the office, the doctor, I said, okay, so now, I said, okay, I have schizophrenia, what's that? And they told me what the side effects I have and that not everybody has them. That's the only way I ever found out. And I was, got to be 20 years old, maybe 21 when I found out.
In the documentary, you go back, you talk to people that went to your high school. By the way, we both lived in San Diego for a time. I thought that was kind of cool. You go back in the documentary to talk to people that you grew up around, people who were in high school with you. You go back to your school, you take your son back there, you explain some of the experiences that you had. You talk to a teacher, right, that you had back then?
His name was Mike from Mike's Metalworks, and I worked for him. He was our family friend, and he just started a business in his garage. And I was a welder, and I started welding for him, and that's how it just grew together and stuff like that.
Did Mike think you were an odd kid?
Yes, everyone did.
How do you know? What did they tell you?
Because I studied children when I was younger, and they would always want to include me, but they didn't because in situations I would just take off. I would just leave. I wouldn't communicate like everybody else. I wouldn't be so friendly, so forward, want to play. I was just a standoffish kid because I was studying them, and I wasn't very interactive as a child of having friendships. And they found that out about me, and they included me sometimes, but they knew something was different about me, but they never asked me about it.
That's amazing. So even when you were young, when you were a kid, you knew that other people, other kids, thought you were odd, thought you were different.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I knew that.
What was that like, Charles? It's
never bothered me. It doesn't bother me now. Even I get treated the same way still today until somebody gets to know me. I'm very upfront about my life of having schizophrenia, and people get really standoffish because of all the media that they've ever heard about people with schizophrenia. But once they get to know me, once they interact with me, they forget that I have schizophrenia completely.
If you're just tuning in, my guest is Charles Steinbach. He is an author, speaker, life coach. He was born with paranoid schizophrenia, chronic paranoid schizophrenia. He is, and while I've taken no inventory of this, one of the most articulately outspoken individuals who lives with this condition that I have ever come across. And Charles, again, I applaud you. I am so thankful that you are doing this to let people in so they can understand what this condition means. And from, as you said, from your perspective, we spend a lot of time, those folks who don't live with a particular mental illness condition, talking about what that condition looks like from the standpoint and perspective of folks who do not have it, whether it be family members, loved ones, clinicians, etc. But rarely do we have the opportunity to get a discussion from the other side, that is, from the side of individuals who live with any particular condition, especially one as distinct and as powerful. It encompasses your entire life and your entire existence as this condition that we call chronic paranoid schizophrenia. So again, I can't applaud you enough, man. I really can't.
Thank you.
I just can't. It's phenomenal. So let's talk about, and I want to spend time, and I'm spending time on the kid portion, because that's when, especially for boys, when they're young, teenagers, early 20s, when the science tells us that schizophrenia shows up, starts becoming evident in the lives of young boys. What would you say to parents who may suspect, hey, my kid's acting different, what's going on? Maybe there's a history, as these things do tend to run in families down the male lineage, this particular condition, paranoid schizophrenia. What's your advice to parents who may suspect or start to see changes in their kid? What should they do? How should they approach? What should they say?
Well, one of the first things that, because I do get phone calls. I do talk to parents about their children and adult children and stuff like that. And the first thing that I try to tell them is that you should try to go to someone that you trust to get properly diagnosed. And these procedures might take 1, 2, 3 times to get the diagnosis correct. And then after that step, I tell them to seek people out, maybe who live with this, maybe who can tell them the coping skills that they can help their children with, or find the understanding of the possibility of what potentially can and does happen with the schizophrenic world, and just educate themselves over the internet and read books and, try to get as much information so they can, if situations come up, they have the knowledge and they're not surprised that it came up.
So get as much information as you can. Find someone, if you can, to talk to your kid who has this condition.
Yeah. That, if somebody has serious depression and they live a successful life, and a child has depression, you should talk to that person about what it was like for them and the skills they helped themselves with, and maybe some of the ups and downs that they might go through. So you can help recognize that the certain stages that your child is going through, so you can help guide them through their episodes, you can call them. You can call it life.
I want to try to play out some scenarios.
Okay.
Let's go back to one of the incidents, episodes, when you started to hear voices. People would see you, you would just stop engaging and leave. If I'm a parent, you're my kid, I'm your parent, one of your friends tells me that they observe this conduct. You just stopped and they think you're a little odd, but they like you, but they just wanted me to know. What is the best way for me to approach you, or should I even talk to you about it? Should I just run out to a professional or something?
Yeah, the best thing is to be honest with people. I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s and stuff where stuff was stuck in the closet. oh, he's just having troubles right now, you don't talk about it, quote unquote. But the best thing I could tell parents to do is saying, hey, my son might possibly have schizophrenia, and we're taking a look at it, and we're learning as much as we can, and we're trying to help them. And if the interaction of the parents, if you're going to get the response you're going to get, basically, if you're more open, more direct, you're going to get a response, whether it be a positive way or a negative way. But at least in yourself, as a parent, you will know you took responsibility for what was right and supporting your child and what they're going through.
If I get a negative response from my kid who I suspect has this condition, then what? Do I keep trying? Do I leave him alone, back off, give him space? What do you advise?
Well, children's brains usually don't develop enough for understanding until after they're 25 or 27 years old. Okay, so they're being children, and they're gonna act out. They're gonna be that way. They're gonna argue. They're gonna fight. Even as teenagers, it gets worse. But anyway, as a parent, you be supportive in the direction that you want to help them go. Even if it takes, 2 or 3 years for them to change their behavior in what you're trying to say, that's the direction you should go.
So keep being supportive, find out as much information as you can, and keep being there for them to try to direct them so that they can get some help.
Yeah, and being honest, being really honest with us is very helpful. I mean, like with my son. My son was born, I don't think he's born with it, but he developed ADHD and stuff like that. And as a parent, I had to set direct boundaries in our relationship. It's like, okay, when it comes to being a child, I had to understand what being a child was compared to his behavior of what ADHD was. See, it's like as a parent, you have to study like we use schizophrenia. Okay, like if your child has schizophrenia and he's having that behavior and the behavior of a regular child, you have to be able to determine what is the regular behavior of a child and what is the schizophrenic behavior. Because they are children, they do turn into teenagers, and people with mental illnesses do have all the same type of growing up stuff, except for we have more of it because of the illnesses that we have.
So let's move forward then to a young man, and I'm using young man as an example because it does strike us men, paranoid schizophrenia, more so, and typically and markedly in our 20s when it becomes full-blown. I've got a son now who is in their mid to late 20s, and the science tells us that brains are fully developed. The decision-making processes, the control centers are fully developed at that time. But it's been a rough road. And I've been trying, I've been directing, we have some good days and some bad days, but certainly hasn't gotten to the point of really acknowledging or wanting to get help. Is the advice for a parent different for a 20-something than it is for a kid? For you, from your standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, as an adult, you should say, okay? As an adult, they're capable of making their own decisions. No matter how much we're affected by their decisions or how much we want something for them, we have to be able to still accept that their choices are their choices. And to initiate a conversation about this is what I feel is, this is what I see, this is how I feel. Is there anything I can do to help you see things differently? Or what can I do to support in your efforts and the goals you want for your life? Instead of acting like if the child was 5 years old and you say, you're going to do what dad says, or stuff like that, you have to change the scale of participation in the interaction. You can hold out your hand for someone to grab a hold of it, but they can also turn around and chop it off and say, I don't want nothing to do with it. And we have, as parents, I'm going through this right now with my son, is that, I have to appreciate and accept that it's his life and his choices that he has to make. Now, if the person is being psychotic and hurting other people, then you should turn around and just call the police and have that situation stop so nobody gets hurt.
Above all, keep yourself safe and try to keep your loved ones safe, your child safe.
Yes, safety is a big thing initiating with people with illnesses. If you can build some level of trust in your relationship, no matter how significant or insignificant, at least that person knows that they could trust you no matter what happens. Like in my relationship with my son, there's no other person on the planet he's ever mentioned. No matter how many times you argue, no matter how many times we fight, he knows Dad's the rock, and Dad's going to tell him what the best way to do things is, or help him choose what to do for himself. But building that trust level at a small age through your life with your children and that become adults is very, very, very helpful in the future of having a mental illness.
And you build that trust with your child by being honest, being forthright, being what?
Accepting his choices that he makes for himself, even as a young child. Like at the dinner table, an example at the dinner table, okay? It's like everyone's having the same thing to eat, and one of my children would say, but I don't want that, I'm not hungry. And most parents would go, well, no, this is what we made and this is what you eat. When I was raising children, I would say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Not everybody likes the same thing all the time. What would you like instead? And I would stop my meal and I would make them what they want, and they would sit down, and for the rest of the night they would have a conversation, interactions, they'd watch TV, they would argue with each other still, but that's how you build the trust level of your interaction with your siblings or your, of your children, that builds that trust. Go, hey, Dad really understands, or Mom understands that I really just don't want this today. It doesn't mean that I get my way all the time,
It seems like an art rather than hard and fast rules and a science with respect to knowing when to accommodate your child and knowing when to say, as you pointed out a moment ago, you don't get your way all of the time.
Correct. I mean, it is like, I've been studying children as a child. When I was a child, I've been studying people my whole life. I find it very fascinating how human beings like to interact with some sort of authority in every interaction that they have. There's always somebody in the interaction who has to be on top. And all my life, I've tried to interact in a different way of not having anybody be on top. And in my book called How I Deal With You, that's one of the things I talk about, is having the interaction with each other on an equal plane, on an equal level. Like, all your thoughts mean as much to me as mine do. All your emotions mean as much to me as mine do. All your feelings mean as much to me as mine do.
Charles Steinbach, author, speaker, and life coach. He lives with chronic paranoid schizophrenia. He is he's the most articulate spokesperson for fighting stigma and helping people who do not live with this condition understand exactly what it means and what it is from the perspective of someone who does indeed live with it. What else you want to talk about, Charles?
I've written 5 books and co-authored a kid's book with Miss Blossom, but I've written a memoir about my life, and then that one's called Schizophrenia's Gift. And the second part of the memoir is More Gifts from Schizophrenia. And the first memoir talks about my life with schizophrenia. The second one gives more information about how I applied certain procedures to be at the level I am today. I speak to colleges, and I've collected their reactions for many years, and I put it into a book about how other people think of me and how everything like that. And the first book that I ever wrote was The Mind of Many, The Mind of One, and I've been writing sonnets since I was 13, and I just collected all those, and they've been through with me all travels, and I put them all together in a book. And that's, and then the book How I Deal with You. And I co-authored a kid's book, Sarah and the Green Stocking Cap. So I venture off into different aspects of my life and writing. I've always wanted to be a writer. I always knew I'd be a writer. I always knew that I would be an author, a speaker, a life coach, and stuff like that. And then one day I was sitting with Sarah, and she said, Charles, you have so much emphasis, and you love so much to change people's ideas about mental illnesses. Why don't you start a company, candle company called Stigma? And that's what I did. I have, and each candle is named after one specific thing I help myself with, like patience. It takes a lot of patience and understanding to understand what stigma is. And I had to use my mind, which that's one of the fragrances. And I used the names of the things I did to help myself through stigma and understand stigma. And now I have 11 cents in stigma. I also make tea lights and wax tarts. And I put them in stores, and I promote stigma, and I promote what needs to change about stigma. And from what I understand in my life is that I use the words that are on my candles to change it in my head. So when you want to change something, it's not just saying it, it's being a part of patience, it's being a part of serenity, it's being a part of all those words and their meanings, and I have come to peace with stigma for myself. And that's what I want to show other people, that there is peace in stigma. You know, I'm an open book. You can ask me any question in the world, and I would never be offended by you.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do want to touch on one other thing that we didn't touch on as yet, and that is the arc of your life. You have done tremendous things with your book, with the video, with the candles, with your books, I should say, with the video, the documentary, with the candles, speaking, coaching, but your life has gone through some bumps. You were homeless at one time?
Yep.
So you've been through some rough times. Give us sort of the sequence of events from being in high school to being homeless to fighting for custody for your kids, for your son, and then to where you are now.
I don't know. It's just like everything seems to happen to me for a reason. As soon as it's like all the negative things that happen to me in life, it has a course of a good outcome later in life. And I don't know, let's see, I was homeless a little bit, maybe for like 6 months, and I started welding, got help. I've been strapped down to gurneys, jammed full of drugs, stuck in rubber rooms. I've been in lots of hospitals. I've even went through treatment for alcoholism, and I have 17 years of sobriety in that, and a lot of people want to know how I do that too. And they're just, you know, for every up in my life or every down in my life, it all works out to the end to where I am today. And the course of my life had to happen this way, or I probably wouldn't be the person I am today.
We hear the term self-medication with the use of drugs and alcohol by individuals who have a mental illness, who live with a mental illness. Was alcohol that for you? Does that term mean anything, or is that something that's just made up?
Oh, no, I just like drinking. I'm just not good at it. I didn't medicate myself. I didn't medicate myself because I wanted to run away from my emotions or my feelings or my thoughts. I'm just really honest with you, really blunt. I like to drink. Okay. And I had to come to terms with just that I'm not good at it, and that's as simple as it is. I understand the complexity of how I was when I drank, and I understand the complexity of when I don't. And to be honest, probably if I would have kept drinking, I wouldn't be here today. But to be honest, I'm not good at it.
Charles Steinbach, closing thoughts, parting comments you want to leave with folks?
Yeah, just, every day can be an adventurous day, and every day can have tragedy. But as long as we grow and live through our experiences and help one another and give each other a helping hand, we're out there. Most of us are out there to help people. Some of us don't. But, I'm one of those people that if you call me up, I'll come move your stuff for you. Yeah.
There you go.
I just hope that people really do get, enlightened by people's experiences and want to give a helping hand.
Charles, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you.
Well, thank you for your time and having me on your show. I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm available till about 9 or 10 at night.
You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Started waking up that early just to process my thoughts.
Really?
When I lived in the boarding cares to figure out schizophrenia. When nobody was up, there was no sounds. For every one thought you have, I have 4.
Yeah.
So I'm just like the Energizer Bunny.